Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first in our webinar series on engaging with employers to secure meaningful and sustainable employment opportunities for young people with disability in Australia. In today's session, we're going to be talking about building relationships with employers to create opportunities, and I will introduce Milton to you very shortly. But before I do so, just a reminder that today's session is being recorded. So if you don't want to have your face in the recording, maybe keep your camera off. I also wanted to make an acknowledgement of country, recognising I work today on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present and thank them for their custodianship of the beautiful lands that I get to live and work on and that were never ceded. Feel free to throw in the chat the traditional owners of the lands that you're coming to us from today. And also Milton is going to talk to us about the traditional or the First Nations people in Kentucky in America, where he's from.
Yes, thank you, Amy. I would like to acknowledge that Kentucky is the traditional homeland of more than 20 indigenous tribes, including the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, Shawnee, and Osage peoples, and pay my respect to elders, both past and present.
Beautiful, thank you. So today's webinar is being presented by the National Collaboration on Employment and Disability. We work within the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, and we have an aim of working towards genuine and lasting reform so that young people with disability can successfully transition from education into decent and socially valued employment. As part of the NCED, we're running a pilot project at the moment, which is called Inclusive Pathways to Employment. And there are many people that are partnering with us in that project online today, as well as a broad array of people from across the disability and employment sector in Australia. So welcome to everybody. This particular webinar has come about from the work that we're doing in Inclusive Pathways to Employment at the moment, where we recognise that there is some capacity building required in the sector on how to really engage with employers to create roles, as opposed to working in the demand and supply kind of traditional ways of finding employment for people. This is a really exciting way of how we can engage with employers to create new roles that really match the young people that we're working with. A couple of housekeeping things to do. I would like to remind those people who are coming to us today from a viewing party. We've run a little bit of a competition where we've encouraged groups of people in organisations to view together so that they can share their learnings and discussion after the webinar. And so a reminder to all of those people to take a photo of your viewing party and email it to me in the hopes that you can win the $100 pizza voucher. I also want to introduce Leanne and Rebecca, who are our Auslan interpreters for the day. And a reminder that you can switch on the closed captions down in the control board down the bottom if you'd like to have those running during today's presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing now and, oh, hang on, that's not what I wanted it to do. Sorry, I'm so used to Teams. So I would like to introduce Milton, and I'm really so excited to have him come here and share his expertise with us, because in all of the research and learning that I've done about customised employment, it is the way that Milton speaks about it that has really given me those light bulb moments around how we can do this work really well. So it's my honour to introduce Milton, who's a trailblazer in the field of customised employment and a steadfast advocate for individuals with disabilities. For over 40 years, Milton has dedicated his professional life to ensuring that people with disabilities have access to meaningful and fulfilling work roles. As we mentioned, he's based in Kentucky in America, and his journey began with a profound interest in the principles of social role valorisation, which emphasises the importance of viewing people with disabilities as having social value in our community. And it's been the cornerstone of Milton's work. Milton's impact on the field of customised employment is truly remarkable. His career highlights include the development of Kentucky's first supported employment program in 1981. And just noting there that in the American sense, supported employment is providing support to people with disabilities in an open employment setting. Has his significant contributions to employment services through his work with Mark Gold and Associates, who are the gold standard in customised employment. His expertise has shaped the delivery of supported employment services, both in Kentucky, but also across the world in US, Canada, Ireland, India, where he's just come back from a recent trip, Australia and New Zealand. In 2013, Milton's dedication was recognised with the Mark Gold Award for Employment, which is a prestigious honour given to individuals who have significantly expanded the community and integrated employment opportunities for people with significant disability. Today, Milton continues his important work as a project associate at the University of Kentucky's Human Development Institute, where he focuses on leadership development in supported employment. He also leads his consultancy, Milton Tyree Employment Consulting, through which he continues to influence and inspire. Please join me in welcoming Milton Tyree, a true champion for inclusive employment and a visionary in the field of customised employment.
Thank you so much, Amy. You're really very kind. I appreciate the introduction. And let me share my screen here. And I appreciate being invited to do both of these online workshops. I have been fortunate just to have a wonderful career in the field of what you call open employment and what we call supported employment over here, and just many opportunities to learn from people with disabilities, their family members, other professionals like us, and business people. And so I always say that I'm sharing things that I've learned along the way, just hoping that the same things that have been helpful to me will also be helpful to you. Now, one note about materials that Amy sent in advance. My presentation has changed a bit. Sorry, I always am working on it up until the time. But what I'll do is I'll make a PDF of the slides I show this morning for you. And I'll share it with Amy, and then so you can have exactly what we looked at today. Now, one other very important point, I have permission to use the stories that I'll be telling and photographs of people in the stories, but you don't have that permission. And the same thing with the content. I have permission with Mark Gold and Associates. So we're pleased for you to have the content, but it is for your use only. Now, I plan to have some time at the end of the session for questions and comments. So when things occur to you that you like to ask about or a comment you'd like to make, if you can write those down, or you can put them in chat as we go, and Amy will keep track of them. But planning on having some time at the end. And one more thing, I just love Australia. It is such a wonderful country. And I've really been working on Australianizing myself. So you'll see a mix of teaching point examples from Australia as well as from the US. Now, this is what I've planned for today. So I'm hoping this is what going to be fitting for you. And there's a lot of topics here. The first ones I'm going to try to do pretty quickly, but they are here really to provide a context for what comes later. Why it is that our work is so critically important at this school leaver age. So it's the why part that I want to spend some time on before we get into the what is part. So the significance of good employment, especially in early years for people with disability. And then just real quickly, I'm going to throw out some cautions about kinds of services that really haven't worked as planned, some things to watch out for. Then a real quick summary of the approaches that we'll talk about today, and then coming back again in October. Things that have a pretty good likelihood of working well. Now, Amy tells me that you all have some experience in discovery, and that's terrific. It underlies customized employment. It tells us how to represent the person with a disability and the nature of the work we'll seek. So I need to dive into it a bit here this morning too. Then we'll define distinctions between customized jobs and labor market jobs. We'll look how we qualify employers. How do you decide which employer to contact for an individual? And then we'll look at the next ask around negotiating fitting jobs with target and qualified employers. That's a lot of stuff. Now, I want to begin with some examples illustrating the importance of really good employment early in life, fitting, challenging, socially valued employment. The young man second to the right here, his name is Gus, and this is a story from Canberra. He's been working at Martino's now for about a year and a half. Now, one of the really important aspects of Gus's work has been how tasks have changed over that year and a half. Job advancement and movement to better things is one really important aspect of school leaver work, I think, and customized employment. And it's something that is sometimes overlooked. A job that's fitting and challenging in November may not be fitting and challenging in July. So here's a picture of Gus and some hair products at Martino's. All right, now, the very initial rudimentary task Gus did, like brushing hair off shoulders of the customers and folding capes and disinfecting combs, greeting clients, things like that. Pretty quickly, Gus got into this new task list, ordering coffee for clients. Now, this is a real upscale kind of barbershop. And so Gus goes to the coffee shop next door and brings back to people whatever it is they want, a cappuccino, flat white, whatever. He prepares the cutthroat razor. Now, that sounds pretty important to be getting done and getting done correctly. Now, this thing, the second from the bottom, this was really interesting, a really important task, obviously, that he was doing pretty early on in this work, mixing hair colors. Now, there was also a list of these tasks to happen in the future, and some of these have happened, like how to charge for extra services and products. And I like this one at the bottom, selecting the day's playlist, to have a good young person do generationally appropriate playlist. But this one in the middle, doing crew cuts, I just learned this week that Gus has just started cutting hair, and his mom sent me this photo. Isn't that fabulous? Now, another thing about Gus's work is when he started this job at Martino's, he already had another job that he actually had applied for when he was in high school and started as soon as he finished. And this is a job at CSIRO, Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization. And you can see Gus at work here. Much of it involves sterilizing lab equipment. Now, last March, Gus celebrated 5 years at CSIRO, and his mom sent me this email, so I want to read it to you. Gus recently celebrated 5 years at the CSIRO. His team set up a bunting at his desk. They ordered a cake, and they celebrated together at morning tea. 5 years at Australia's major scientific organization is quite a milestone for a young man who wasn't allowed to get his Bunsen burner license in year 7 because the science faculty assumed that he'd be a danger to property and others. Talk about varying mindsets, about what's possible for Gus. Just think of this life employment trajectory that Gus has now in his early 20s. Fantastic. Here's another recent employment story from Sydney, reflecting a progressive mindset about Tyler. Now, Tyler is standing in the middle of these men in front of PSI Speed Shop. And this was work that he began when he was in high school. I'm going to play a brief clip of Tyler's mom, Beck, describing his work and his relationships at PSI Speed Factory. Now, this is a quick clip, It's just 90 seconds. But please make some notes about what you learn about Tyler's experiences and relationships, because when we finish, I'm going to ask you to put some things in chat that you noticed from the clip. So here we go.
Building his connections within the community, Tyler has been able to establish relationships and friendships with the young men who work in the workshop. They have invited him to race days where he's been able to visit the pits where the cars get ready for those races. He's been able to meet them on the weekends at places called Cars and Coffee, which is exactly what it is, cars and coffee. People get together drinking coffee and talking about cars. He has met people who bring their cars into the workshop, and he then, through chatting, he works out where they are going to be, and they catch up. He catches up with them down at the local barbershop here in our community. He also builds friendships and relationships with people because he wants to take photos of their cars, and he has developed a social media page where local car enthusiasts are actually liking his Instagram posts and sharing that connection. And as he gets older, those relationships are forging even stronger, and I know that that is going to be the way forward for him, and developing that connection and friendships with those people are going to be the things that will help guide and navigate through those tricky teenage years for him.
Great. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing a second here, and just be interested for people to put things in chat that you heard that Tyler has gotten from this really early experience, working at PSI Speed Shop. Confidence, absolutely. Friendships, yeah, and community, social connection. What's the variety of kinds of things you heard that he did? Inclusivity, absolutely. Connections that are not paid for, absolutely. Maximizing one of his interests. Yeah, he's interested in cars. He gets to go to Cars and Coffee and talk to people about their cars. Establishing a social media page, exactly. Taking off on his own and developing new kinds of opportunities around an interest that he has. Exploring his community. Joy, yes, absolutely. Photography, different skills embedded in what he's doing in addition to learning automotive skills. Yeah, sharing interests. So here he is working in a job where he likes what other people like who work there and bring their cars there, extending himself, other male connections and so forth. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. And so that's the idea. Isn't that another great start? Self-directing his own activities and following his passion. That's what we're aiming for here, you see? And so it's just another really nice illustration, making his mom proud. Right. It is so important, isn't it? What not just what people are getting out of the work, but what their families are getting out of it too. Yeah. Feeling valued. Fabulous. So another really good example of a good head start in work. Now, Amy mentioned that the social role valorization theory, or SRV theory, has been a foundational source of learning in my career. And so what I want to go through now are just quickly some reasons from SRV theory literature about why work is important. These are kinds of things people will ask me, why do you do what you do? And this is part of my answer, these ideas. That other than people who are independently wealthy, employment is an expectation for people of working age. But we also know that historically, more often than not, employment has not been an expectation for people with disability. Therefore, not working is a difference that will be perceived in a negative way by the larger society and just add to people's social devaluation. Now, related to point one, the role of employee is a really big role. It takes a lot of our time and effort. And because possessing the employee role is a societal expectation, it's a common way of perceiving people's social value and status in the world. And this applies to one's self-perception as well as the perceptions of others. You know, a common question that people ask you when you move into a new neighborhood is, what do you do? And what they're meaning is, where do you work? What's the nature of your work? What's your job title? Now, for people fortunate enough to have fitting and suitably challenging work, the role of employee provides one important facet of having purpose in life, a way to contribute, giving something of yourself, making a positive difference in the world. Now, this is important for everyone, but it's especially important for people with disability, especially people with disability who have spent so much of their lives on the receiving end of assistance, while being deprived of the innate joy of giving something of themselves. Obviously, the kind of work we have influences our income and our standard of living. And we're getting really deeply into this area of SRV theory called the good things of life, having access to the good things of life, the universal good things of life that everybody wants, regardless of culture or age or socioeconomic status. These are things that everybody wants. And work is explicitly one of these good things of life. And the role of employee opens the door to many others, some of which you mentioned just looking at Tyler, like friendships, access to community places, opportunities to learn and discover your own abilities, skills, and talents. Now, here's a piece of fairly recent research at the top here, showing a relationship between paid work experience in high school and work later in life. You know, that's not surprising. It's really expectable, I think. The way I think about it is that if you have good, fitting, challenging work in high school, like Tyler and Gus, it sets the stage for similar expectations throughout life. Well, this is what life is like. And unfortunately, the same is true if one does not have a positive experience working while in high school. Work may be determined not to be feasible or unimportant or something that's out of reach. So we've already looked at some different mindsets about Gus, the people at CSIRO who had the mindset that he's learning to be, that he will learn to be a valued lab technician, and the mindset of the science faculty at school just a few years earlier that thought he wouldn't be able to learn about safe handling of a Bunsen burner. So mindsets are really important. They're really at the core of so much of what happens for people. It's one of the 10 SRV themes, is mindsets and expectancies. My SRV colleague, Betsy Newville, summarizes it this way. Mindsets are powerful shapers of action. Our mindsets govern what we see and what we perceive after we see it, and how we respond to the world around us and the people we encounter. Now, I want to share with you a personal mindset example, because you see, I started my career in the late 70s as a high school special education teacher. And of course, you know, I care deeply about my students and I really love teaching. But even then, you know, I knew that work was going to be an important part. But here comes the mindset piece. My mindset at that time was that what my students needed was a sheltered workshop, or what y'all call disability enterprise. Why was that my mindset? Because it's everything I'd seen. It's what I had learned at the university, that was the place where people with disabilities work. So because of my mindset, what do you think happened to my students? Sure enough, yeah, they went to work in a sheltered workshop. And as they left school, they did. And a year later, I resigned from my teaching job and I followed them. And I went to work in the same sheltered workshop as a work adjustment supervisor, only to become really disillusioned because it was not what I had expected at all. I thought it was a place that my students would go and have good work. Well, it was really unchallenging work, and it was a poor fit for people on my crew. And sometimes we ran out of work, and the pay was embarrassingly low. And it was this experience at the sheltered workshop that put me on the track to learn about open employment. I left the workshop after 6 months, and I began to study and then practice open employment. And so that was almost 45 years ago, and I've never looked back. Now, let's look at the other side of the coin. What if from early in life, you have high expectations for work where everybody works? So here's Jack, a young man I know from Canberra. Jack started doing yard work for money in his teens, along with one of his cousins. I did the same thing back in the day. So you can look at the common skills that he acquired here. Obviously, learning how to cut grass and pick up the yard, but maintaining the mower, keeping the books, how your earnings are going and so forth. Well, about the same time, Jack, he's around 15 here, I think. Jack got his first casual weekend job as a soccer referee at his local soccer club. And how did he get that job? Well, he was well known at the soccer club because he had played there for 12 years. Jack was the game leader for the 4 to 5-year-olds and also the 6 to 7-year-olds. He set up the games, co-facilitated skill development sessions, and provided much needed encouragement for the young aspiring soccer players. Here you see Jack giving some instruction on a drill. What a fabulous experience for him and those other soccer players, isn't it? Just a piece, you see, just on this trajectory of good employment. Then he had work experience at Harris Scarf, where he stocked shelf, used the cash register, scanned items, and so forth. Then things took a step up. He got an apprenticeship in years 11 and 12 at an Australian school-based apprenticeship at the University of Canberra. He had a variety of tasks, but particularly enjoyed working alongside other staff and compiling documents, setting up rooms for lectures and events, and instructing students during the exams. Now, after Jack finished school, these were all, the kinds of work he had while he was still in school. When he finished school, remembering his, coaching of the younger soccer players, he decided to give a try to after-school care. And so he got a part-time job doing this. And here he set up games for the students. Along with other colleagues, he prepared the afternoon tea and he supervised the student games, encouraged them, and so forth. And at the same time, he had another part-time job at Government House. Now, there's a high-status job. So Jack here worked in the household, what was called the household. And this entailed him setting up rooms for events, welcoming officials and greeting guests. Just think of the people that he got to meet, international dignitaries, I'm sure, and serving guests. What a fabulous job for a young man. Now, Jack has moved on from both of these jobs now, after school care and his employment at the Government House. And he turned 22 this summer, if I'm right on this. I think I am. And this is he's going into his second year of work at Uni Lodge, which is at Australian National University. It's like all the dorms where students live on campus. And like with Gus, this work that he has at Uni Lodge, where his job is delivering mail to students. Now, and maintaining packages for students. So, as you could guess, Amazon stays pretty busy getting packages to students, and they were really falling behind organizing the packages and being sure they're getting to the students and so forth, inventorying them. And so that was a big part of Jack's work at Uni Lodge. Anyhow, like with Gus, what a great launch into the world of work. So now, just quickly, I want to take a look at some practices that have not had good results for people with disabilities getting work. And I mention these quickly and in passing, but mention them nonetheless, because these old ideas that have been around for some decades have a way of reemerging as new ideas. It happens in the US all the time. So the same may be true where you live, but there are things to kind of have your antennae up for, to be looking for, because, you know, it's not that bad people are involved, but they just don't work very well. And of course, I'm not being critical of the people behind the practices, because the way I see it, we're all doing the best we can. But I am being critical of the practices and to be on the lookout for them, because we can't waste time. We need to make the most effective use of our time, and certainly of the school leavers' time. So one of the things has been this kind of entrenchment in readiness programs, like sheltered workshops where I worked. You know, the idea for the sheltered workshop is people could learn to work there and then maybe get a job on the outside. Well, it never really worked out that way. And readiness programs as practice for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities just do not have a good track record for much of anything, perhaps except for getting in other readiness programs. But they're very popular and just keep coming back. And a lot of times for school-age people, they keep coming back. And now readiness, you know, there is preparedness and readiness in everyone's life, so it has a common sense appeal to it. But the way it's practiced, again, doesn't get a lot of scrutiny as to whether it's effective or not. And there have been people challenging it for decades. One of these people is Dr. Lou Brown. He was one of the progressive special ed innovators in the 70s, University of Wisconsin in Madison. And early on, he was challenging so much of what was being done in the US in special education and in disability human services, especially related to congregation and segregation of people with disabilities, putting people with disabilities all together. He was opposed to that idea in special ed and in programs. And this idea of readiness by putting people through simulations and approximations of work and the real thing, instead of people just having the real thing. And he had this famous saying, pre means never, like pre-employment means never employment. So I've got this little clip of Dr. Brown I'd like to show you from the mid-70s. It's just about a minute, but gives you a little piece of what was being said decades ago about pre-employment and so forth.
So he said, pre leads nowhere. It's just, see, then you'd follow up your graduates, and they're in pre-vocational workshops. And there are people, I went to a workshop in Montgomery County, Maryland a while back, and I saw this 55-year-old man in pre-vocational. I mean, it should be pre-social security. I mean, nothing to do. In our field, with the people we're talking about now, pre doesn't lead anywhere. So we said, let's stop using pre. So if you want to teach language, fine. Talk about real language. Now what's real language? If you want to talk about, let's forget about pre-work. If you want to talk about work for these people, let's teach real work. Now what's real work? And so you see, by examining the words you use and the definitions and examples that are associated with these words, and if you're trying to be a little honest with yourself, they turn out to be heavy. I mean, they can have a dramatic effect on what you do.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing here just a second. I should have asked this earlier, but I just want to be sure that the sound is okay on the clips. Is it working all right?
Yes, thanks, Milt. We're able to
Okay.
hear it.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you. All right, so that was Dr. Brown. Now, what I'm going to show next is something that happens in the US
So we said,
around what we call work transition, what you call work experience. And it happens quite a bit. The idea behind it is a good idea, but the translation of it doesn't work very well. But nonetheless, we've been doing it for more than 40 years. So the popular approach is this in work transition in the US. We have this regimented way of placing students their last 3 years in school and somewhat arbitrarily in a variety of predetermined businesses to get some work experience. These are typically entry-level kinds of tasks, high turnover kinds of tasks, low status tasks, usually without pay. But the idea is, like I have a photo here of somebody stocking in a grocery, a Kroger in downtown Louisville, and somebody mopping the floor. And, I do have a Sydney picture of a Hungry Jack's here. It's Burger King in the US, the same chain. Anyhow, the idea is that you have this relatively limited number of options, like stocking, custodial work, working in fast food. You rotate students through these programs and they work someplace 6 weeks and then work someplace else for 6 weeks. And the idea behind it isn't a bad one. The idea is to give students a variety of kinds of work experiences to see which one they like. Here's the problem. The work experiences that are predetermined are very narrow in scope when you look at the whole universe of work possibilities. That's one problem. The other is that one of the things we've learned is it's really advantageous to start with the person and not the job. And these all start with the job and put the person in them. And unfortunately, what has happened is a lot of the time, students haven't liked any of their work experiences in high school. And so they finish school with a bad taste in their mouth about work. Like, no, I don't want to work. That was awful. So, it's and the other thing is, for the most part, they were unpaid. So even though what was desired by the school district was a very good thing, it wasn't very likely to happen. So what have we learned that would be better? And so these are the approaches that we'll be talking about today and then in October. The first one I just said. Starting with the person, not the job. So as open employment has evolved, there's been a lot more focus on personally fitting work. And we do that with discovery, right? Discovery's been around since 1988. So, that's a good number of years to give it a try. And it's a good process. Start with the person, not the job. I think of that as the first big shift. The second is looking beyond typical job descriptions, customized employment. As open employment has evolved, there's been more focus on negotiating jobs of mutual benefit, jobs that are good for the business, they're good for the person you're representing, instead of just being limited by job descriptions. And I think of this as the third big shift. There's been more focus on learning how instruction and support typically happen for anybody on a job. Here, Gus is at work at Martino's. And so he learned the job from the other men at Martino's. So this is another idea. This idea of natural support's been around, more than 30 years and has become better understood and more robust over time. And it's going to be one of the focus points when we come back in October. All right, so let's do a quick review of discovery here. And discovery is so important because it's where you get your words. What are you going to say about the person you're representing, and where you're going to get the places, that you're going to be contacting is through discovery. Now, I'm going to show a brief clip here that was developed by Imagine More, which is a family-driven capacity building organization in Canberra. So this is a little 2-minute clip. and it provides a nice, clear, and concise description of discovery. And I'll have this in your slides with a YouTube link below because I'm thinking you might want to use this sometime too. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to need to reshare all my equipment here, and we'll watch this on YouTube. Yep.
This video explains the process of discovery, which is the first step in customized employment. The aim of discovery is to better understand a person's interests, skills, and ideal work conditions through conversations and observations. Discovery provides rich, reliable information about the job seeker, which is used to plan job search efforts. A job facilitator usually guides the discovery process. Discovery uncovers the person's interests in everyday activities that they do with enthusiasm. Discovery also finds out which work conditions do work well and don't work well for the person to ensure their success at work. Lastly, discovery shows a person's potential contributions they could offer an employer, including skills from their life, work, and training. Contributions express what the person can do, like arranging products or welcoming guests. All of this information about the person is recorded in a discovery profile. The next step is to plan the job search, identifying workplaces where the person's interests and skills align with potential work tasks. To research workplaces, the job facilitator would start talking to family, friends, work colleagues, and wider community contacts about workplaces that might have tasks that could be a good fit for the job seeker's contributions, interests, and work conditions. This process could take place in a planned gathering, aiming to generate a list of people for the job facilitator to contact. The facilitator uses this list to approach workplaces and identify mutually beneficial job roles.
Okay, great. Isn't that a nice little clip? So anyhow, you may have some use for that sometime too. So discovery is a process that does appeal to people's common sense of getting to know people and helping people getting to know themselves before developing plans, starting with the person, not the job, spending time with people and learning from them. Who is this person? Instead of giving daggone tests and evaluating people. It learns about people's interests related to work, conditions or things that need to be in place for people to be at their best, and contributions that they have to offer business. In other words, it just sets the stage for customized job development. What are personal characteristics of a good job? Now, so often what happens is all kinds of decisions are made about somebody just based on the tip of the iceberg. Just a really, really surface understanding of the person's life. And maybe it's decided on where he or she's going to work, just on that surface information. And we know we need so much more. So we need people's permission and their families' permission to really understand their life experiences, you know, their gifts, their talents, their interests, their conditions, their challenges, their vulnerabilities. So we have several primary ways of learning and discovery. First is to get permission to just spend time where the person is, get a picture of everyday life at home, in the community. How do people spend their time? Who do they know? What are they good at doing? Can you join them doing some of those things that they really enjoy, that they're good at doing? And then Try some new activities based on what was learned in the familiar activities, just stretching the boundaries and the possibilities, discovering new kinds of things. We also get information from interviewing people with permission of the job seeker. And, so this could be family or friends or people who would have insights and ideas about work or other things to explore further. Obviously, you want people's permission to do this. And then later on in the process to review some records. And what we get out of that are what needs to be in place for a person to be successful, or their conditions, all kinds of stuff to know there, right? Like, who are their coworkers? How old are they? Maybe a particular gender of coworker, and how do people relate with each other? What's the turnover in the business? What's the nature of the task? What's the nature of the environment? All kinds of things to learn about what works well with people and put that together. How are we incorporating people's interests related to the labor market and potential contributions they have for employers? And we're looking at ways that all three of these will overlap. And as much as possible, get that sweet spot in the middle. Now I have a little blue box at the top here that I'll read. It might be kind of hard to see on your screen. These are a couple social role valorization sorts of points. One is we're always searching for the most valued of options within the range of options, because that's what gives people the, lifts them up more, right? So if you have a range of options, what would be the very best? And let's start looking for that and imagining what could be, not just what's currently in place or readily available. Right, so here is a work transition example or a work experience example that was rooted in discovery. This is Millie, young woman, lives in Canberra, and these were some things that were learned about her. So the things at the top of the list are people conditions. She wants to work with friendly and engaging people and a small group of people. And I know Millie, also a consistent group of people, people who aren't changing all the time, so people can get to know her and how she gets around in the world and what that looks like. She doesn't want to work like off on her own someplace. She works really well doing precise kinds of things, but she doesn't want time pressure, so some kind of tasks that need to be done well, but not quickly. But she also wants regular work. You see, she doesn't want any downtime. She wants to know, like, what's going to happen when I show up, and so forth. So these kinds of things you have in mind when you're looking at a work experience site. For Millie, it's like, it's not just a predetermined site at, a fast food restaurant or something. All right. These are her interests. So you see, she has a creative bent. Also, she can make 1,000-piece puzzles. Now, that's pretty interesting. If you can put together a 1,000-piece puzzle, you can do all kinds of marketable things. She likes animals, especially dogs and horses. And she's really, she's good at and interested in interacting with other people, which I would name as one of her contributions. But these are some additional ones. She has a real eye for color and design. How about that? She's very organized and methodical. A place for everything and everything in its place. That's Millie. Great attention to detail. Excellent memory. She's motivated to do her best, and she's got a really great sense of humor. So you can see, you can just envision talking to business people about Millie, having learned all of this about her. Well, let me tell you about Millie, and she is really organized. Boy, and she has this gift for design and color. It's really great. Depending on what business you're talking to, you see, you already know about Millie. And so this is the work experience site at KBR. This is Kellogg, Root and Brown, which is one of the world's largest science, technology, and engineering companies. That was kind of at the top of the list, don't you imagine? A lot of status for working at KBR. These are the kinds of things she does there. She keeps track of all the copiers to be sure they have paper in them. She sets up meeting rooms and the kitchen, puts together packets of information. She greets people at reception. Now, the animal thing was a little hard to work in because they do not have dogs and horses, but she does feed the office fish. So just a glimpse, you see how discovery gives a lens to think about what would be really good for Millie and what would be really good for KVR. Let's go find that. And so that is really the essence of customized employment, which is what we're going to take a look at now. All right. So as Amy was saying, too often we've been limited by labor market jobs. And, labor market jobs may be fine, jobs with job descriptions, if it's a good, fitting, suitable, challenging job for the person. But what has happened too often is that people with disability have either ended up absolutely unemployed or underemployed. And so that's why we have customized employment, to look at designing a job, just like with Millie's, that's a good fit for the business and a good fit for the person. Now, so much of it revolves around this idea of contribution versus competition, because everybody can contribute, but not everybody can compete. And it has been that competition that has left so many people either underemployed or unemployed. Now, here's a nice little clip again, describing customized employment, a couple minutes long, that I want to show from Imagine More. Here to the right one.
This video explains customized employment, where job roles are created to align with the unique strengths and interests of people with disability. Customized employment focuses on the person first, not a job vacancy. It's about creating roles that value people's unique interests and skills that benefit an employer. Traditionally, jobs are created when employers advertise work roles and job seekers compete with others who apply for that job. Customized employment starts with the person, focusing on their unique interests and strengths to match them with employers who need those skills. It also considers the person's ideal work conditions that need to be in place for the person to thrive. Job facilitators play a key role in tailoring and negotiating employment opportunities based on individual skills and interests. This approach benefits employers by connecting them with individuals who have skills that fulfill specific workplace needs and contribute positively to their business. Many individuals with disability have found success with customized employment, finding roles where their unique contributions are valued. Let's look at some Australian success stories. Sam has diverse interests and skills, including managing mail and interacting with people. Sam's optimal work conditions involve being active and working with others. Over time, these qualities led Sam to a fulfilling role in parcel processing and delivering mail to students at university accommodation. Casey has a passion for woodworking, which was discovered through their school projects. Casey thrives in environments that involve hands-on tasks and clear steps. These strengths and preferences eventually guided Casey to a satisfying job making customized cheese boards. Jordan has a range of interests and skills, such as making hot beverages for others, organizing, and using an iPad. Jordan's primary condition for success is for a variety of tasks without excessive downtime. This eventually led to a fulfilling job in a barbershop, serving customers. Customized employment paves the way for meaningful and fulfilling employment by focusing on a person's unique skills and interests.
All right, so let's dig into this idea, which was described very nicely in 2 minutes there. But this is Mark Gold and Associates conceptualization of customized employment. So It could be a little different from some other people who teach it too and teach it well. But this is our example or our model for this. And at the top, you can see it's the business case for customized employment, balancing the equation. In other words, it's good for the business, it's good for the person you're representing, it's equal. So we start with these items I have in red at the top. By devoting time in a business, we'll talk about this again in about 10 minutes, but we're looking at 3 to 6 hours in a business, a qualified business where we've already made a presentation and they've agreed to let us come in and take a look. And we're spending time observing in particular what other employees are doing and the work setting. What are we noticing about the setting and what are we noticing about customers? And here's the equation. On the job candidate, the job seeker, the school leaver side, we're looking at meeting their conditions for success in work that relates to their interests and that matches their specific contributions. Where did we learn that? Discovery. So we've already devoted time with the person. Now we have a targeted or a qualified business. I'm going to talk about how to get one of those in a few minutes here, and we get inside that business to think about what are they going to get out of the deal. And these are 3 things in particular that we look for. We look for tasks that address unmet needs, things that aren't getting done the way they need to get done. This happens in any business. Now, these aren't tasks that just nobody else wants to do. That's not what I mean. They're tasks that aren't getting done the way they need to get done, that are a fit for the person you're representing. We'll look at an example of this in a minute. Tasks that enhance the business. So something that the person you're representing is just really good at doing. And you notice something like some tasks that they could add to their business even, that this person could bring with themselves. And this last item is a task better performed by others. All of these were described really nicely in that video, but this is when you find a senior person or a person with lots of credentials, upper management person, and they're performing some tasks that you notice that would be a really good fit for the person you're representing. And you say, hey, would it be helpful so you could do more manager kinds of things or business owner kinds of things if this other person did these tasks for you? So let's look at a couple. These are Kentucky work transition examples. I retitled them work experience. So this first one is Corey, about Corey. Now, Corey has a terrific personality, one of these people that has the gift of gab. And while a terrific personality is usually appreciated at work, in itself, it is seldom a reason for getting hired. But one of Corey's more marketable skills related to his skill in driving his power wheelchair. I've always said if there were a wheelchair motocross, Corey would be in that because he's quite an adept driver of the wheelchair. Now, Donna, who worked for the school district as their job coach, was returning a purchase at a big retail Walmart. And when she was making the return of the purchase, she noticed this big mess behind the counter. All of these shelves and cubbies just had merchandise flowing out of them. And so she asked, she said, golly, it looks like you guys are really busy here. And the woman said, yeah, that's really embarrassing. The department managers are supposed to come up here and load up carts with that stuff and take it back to their department, but they get so busy they don't get to do it. It looks terrible and stuff doesn't get back on the floor. And Donna is thinking, bingo, work setting problem. You see, unmet need. The stuff looks bad, and it is bad. It's not a good image for the business. Plus, the merchandise isn't on the floor where it could be sold. So Donna negotiated a job for Corey, where he drives up to the return desk Other workers load items for a specific department, say the housewares, and they load that in his cart, and he adeptly drives it to the designated department, exchanging pleasantries with Walmart shoppers on the way. So you see, that's a really nice high school work experience, you know, and he was paid for this too, by the way. And so it was good for him, you know, gave him a good taste of work. Is he going to do that his whole life? No, that's okay. It's a good, solid job that was a good fit for him, and it was a good fit for Walmart. Let's look at another one. Now, this is a before and after story for Michael. In his year 12, he was placed in one of those predetermined jobs I was telling you about earlier. Doesn't work very well lots of the time. And it was a fast food place called Dairy Queen, or abbreviated DQ. It did not go well. He was a lobby attendant, somebody who bussed the tables and kept everything looking nice. You know, Michael's one of these guys who likes everything to be just a certain way. And people were always messing up his work, so that the task wasn't a good fit for him. But worse than that, the coworkers weren't a good fit because they were other teenagers, but ones who particularly lacked maturity. And they bullied Michael. They found ways to exploit him, and their pranks ultimately ended up costing him his job. Now, to the credit of the school, instead of blaming Michael, they took a step back to consider what they hadn't done well. And this time really looked at things that were important for Michael, like work where his talent for things being just so would be valued, having mature coworkers who would be good model workers. So they started again with discovery. And while visiting a targeted business, Trustwall, the job supporter, Mary, or the job coach, noticed that the welders at Trustwall were leaving their welding work and heading to this machine station to grind punches that were used in the production of trusses. And she also noticed that sometimes the accuracy was off and they had to return and do them again. So that intrigued her. And she asked the manager about it. She said, I'd like to learn more about this punch grinding operation. And what she learned was that it was a position that was trained in-house. It didn't require any kind of particular credential or certification. Now, welding does in the US. I'm sure it does in Australia too. But being a punch grinder did not require that. And so the nature of the work itself seemed like it'd be something suitably challenging for Michael. The people there seemed like they'd be good coworkers. So she told the manager she was representing somebody she believed could learn to grind the punches correctly every time. And it would allow the welders to stay with their certified welding work while Michael did this other work. You see, she was paying attention to employees and tasks that are performed by others. Just imagine the difference in Michael's life if, you know, like just stuck in the old failed Dairy Queen story versus living out this new story in his job at Trustwall. So let's get into qualifying an employer. How do we do this? Well, a lot of these jobs have come from family connections and associates and, you know, business people who are already known, and from families who know people and, you know, have contacted businesses on their own. That was true with Millie's job at KBR. Now, another way, kind of on the professional end, where I hang out most of my life, is a more formal sort of a meeting. What at Mark Golden Associates we call a customized plan for employment meeting. And so I'm going to just tell you a little bit about this and how it works. Basically, you convene a group of, you know, 8 to 10 paid and unpaid people, and obviously the job seeker, and you review all the things you've learned in discovery, everything that you've learned about conditions, interest, and contributions. And from that, you develop a task list that's consistent with conditions, interest, and contributions. And from that, you develop a list of specific employers who match the conditions, interests, and contributions and the tasks, and some contacts, somebody inside to contact. So let's do an example real quickly here. I think we can do this. We've got a few minutes. All right, so this is Jack. You met Jack earlier from Canberra. So here's some of Jack's conditions that would be introduced at a customized plan for employment meeting. The facilitator would say, Jack thrives in roles that offer tangible outcomes and visual results. We would have already discussed this during the meeting, of course. He flourishes in social roles with team interaction. He prefers a regular schedule that provides predictability. It's crucial for him to have a clear idea of his tasks, but he also wants task variety. And then, we get into his interests. Well, he's really interested in exercise and fitness, and he likes to collect the mail at home, and he has an interest in administrative kinds of tasks, and he's enthusiastic about AFL tipping. And on the contribution side, he has an encouraging and welcoming personality. People just like being with Jack. And he's a strong young guy, so his strength is a real asset for moving stuff or stamina on the job. He has a really good sense of direction, like for delivery and navigating a large premise. And he really is a natural leader. Now, so from that, tasks would be generated, such as these. You can see how those fit, right? Delivering documents, instructing fitness class, setting up equipment in rooms, document compiling. And so, like, the group would have come up with those tasks. But what I'm going to ask you all to do now in chat is to think of where you live. I'm thinking you all don't live in Canberra. So where you live in Melbourne or wherever, what are businesses that you can think of that need those tasks? And do you know somebody who works there? I mean, somebody who works there, the owner, or somebody who would know somebody who works there. And I'd like you to put that in chat. Like a business, these would be the qualified employers, you see. A gym. Okay, a name of a gym, Carly, specific name. Do you know the name of a gym? Okay, your gym. PTPT, excellent. Okay, and do you know somebody who works there, Carly? I bet you do. You go there. Do you know the manager? No? Okay. But you could find somebody, couldn't you? All right. The Eastern Football League, EFL. There you go. Joanne, do you know somebody there? Okay. East Street Gym. Okay. You know the owner and two instructors. Okay. That's all right. Well, maybe you could find somebody, you see. It's good to have a contact person if you have them, but if you don't, that's okay. We can find somebody. You all got the idea. Let's get some more here. These are qualified employers to contact for Jack. Anybody else belong to a gym? Know a team or something? All right. Okay, United Fitness, great. So Peter, do you know somebody who works there? Okay, you know the owner, Sean. Perfect. All right. Okay. Okay, here we go. Now they're moving the post office. Okay. And so the Frankston Football Club. All right, perfect. All right, so here's the idea. This is where the qualified businesses come from. They're not arbitrary businesses. Yeah, keep them rolling here, and I'll keep talking. But that's the idea. And you want a business, and to the extent possible, a contact person, because that's your warm lead to get in the door to talk about Jack. And so these are other, businesses, some of which he's gotten jobs in now. All right. So let me look at the clock here. Yeah, okay, we need to move on here. So your initial ask with a business is you're seeking a 25-minute appointment for these purposes. provide your reason for contacting the business. I'm representing Jack, a young man I think could potentially have a lot to offer your business. And I'd really like to learn more about your operation and what's important to you there. And I'm working, my school or my organization, whatever, we get to work with businesses and people with disabilities to look at designing jobs that benefit both. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about. And then you represent the job seeker using a visual resume. Oh, this other point 3 here, I'm sorry, I didn't describe. So one of the things you can use is a customized employment explainer. Amy provided one of those with the handouts ahead of time. And then to represent the job seeker, you can use a visual resume. And if they're interested in moving forward, well, that's an interesting idea you have here. Well, what I'd like to do next is spend some time in your business to learn more about what you do here. You remember this is what we were talking about way up here, right? Spending that time to look at what all happens in the business. All right. Now, you have this CE explainer, and this is from Imagine More, just like the little video clips are. It's a nice little leave behind. Now, you would need to have yourself scripted to talk about customized employment, 6 to 8 minutes. You want to practice your spiel. And then you can leave this, it's a nice leave behind with people that describes what is customized employment, who is it for, what is discovery, how are employers supported, job development, how are employers supported. And then at the bottom here, this is stuff we're going to get into next week, on the job support stuff. Now here is a visual resume of Jack that I'm gonna stop sharing. And just to give you the idea, if you haven't seen one of these before, about a visual resume, here we go. So the idea here is to tell a story about Jack that's going to be compelling, to a business. Like, here's Jack's story. These are things he's learned about. And so you're showing performance photos and life experiences to create interest in somebody. So here's Jack. That's a picture from Government House. That's a great photo. Okay, so you talk about Jack's school. All of this is scripted. And it depends on what kind of business you're contacting. But if you're going to Government House, before he got his job, you'd want to, highlight this food service and hospitality study, his school-based apprenticeship. You can tailor these to the business you're contacting. And, one of the things Jack's looking at now, I know, is as fitness instructor. And so the CIT course he took in fitness instruction. Again, his education, work experience. And then some volunteer work. And it's good to show, like Jack's social conscience and his community involvement and leadership. And one of the things that's really key here, I wanted to get to this last slide, is the last slide shows tasks. And these tasks, come from the customized plan for employment meeting. And I can see from the meeting we looked at with Jack that there have been some additional things added here as well. But the task needs to relate to the business that you're contacting with the visual resume. So that's representing the person with a visual resume. Right. Hang on, did something wrong there. Sorry. Here we go. No, that's not it either. Let's try again. There we go. Now, this last part we want to be looking at is negotiating a fitting job within a qualified or a targeted business. And Amy also provided a handout for you on this called the Business Job Seeker Compatibility Analysis. And we'll have, I'm going to go through this in particular next time, because part of this deals with determining job support, but it really has two purposes. The first part of it deals with design of the job, and the second part of it deals with on-the-job support. Now, this is a document that is a compilation of some different work through Mark Gold and Associates, but it was a document that was developed by Family Advocacy in Sydney, Resourcing Inclusive Communities. And I have permission to share this with you as well. So time doesn't allow really to go through it today, but because I want to leave time for questions. So just in closing on this particular section, a few slides. One is just to remember what customized employment does not involve. Comparative evaluations. We don't care about test scores. Never. Not job openings, not looking for job openings, not competitive interviews, not traditional resumes, not existing job descriptions, but instead discovery, customized plans, visual, non-traditional resumes, representation of the job seeker, focus on specific benefit to employers, and negotiation of a customized job. Now, here's a quote from Maya Angelou that gives me great comfort in life. Do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. And so let's take some questions now. And also, let me give you my email address. So if we don't get to all the questions, you want to email me about something, it's just my name at iCloud.com, Milton Tyree at iCloud.com. All right, so we got about 13 minutes for questions here.
So there was a question a little bit earlier on when we were talking about discovery, Milton.
Yes.
Nee asked, how do you handle the interests of young people when they often change over the course of time?
Oh, of course they do. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a really good point. And the way I think of discovery with young people is, I mean, a lot of it is condition specific and contribution specific, maybe more than interests. I don't know. Here's the thing. You're not going to find, I mean, people don't know what they want to do for a career. When you're that age, I mean, you're like, nobody does. Disability or no disability. You're 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. You don't know what you want to do with your life. So what I think of as being most important is, instead of it just being an arbitrary job, to find a job that's going to be interesting at that point in time. And it's one of the reasons that you can try a lot of things, like the examples I gave with Gus and Jack. And, they had tried a lot of different things. So I think the point is, you want to design it so it works really well. So you leave school with a really good taste of employment. Yeah, work is good. I want to work. That's what I wanted for my daughter. My daughter does not have a disability. She started working when she was 15, and I just wanted her to have good work experiences, so that when she got out of school, she'd think, yeah, I want to work. Work is good.
I love
Does that help?
Milton. Yeah, I love that. I often talk, and within our IP project, we often talk about that having varied experiences is important, because learning something that you don't want to do is just as beneficial as learning what you do want to do.
Right.
We've had a question from Emma. She asks, do you encourage young people to attend with the coach or job developer to pitch to an employer?
We do not. And it's one of the things about doing short presentations. You can't get into a lot of detail, but we think of customized employment as a representational form of employment. And so we devote time with people in discovery, and the idea is then that we are their representative, and we really use people's visual resume as a proxy for that person. And we use the customized job description instead of the HR office, or the employer needs benefits analysis. So the thing about, and it's not that we do want the business to meet the person. It's one of the reasons for the visual resume, but it's very complicated to be going into a business and making observations about what you're seeing while you're concerned about making a positive introduction about another person. It frankly is too complicated. So the businesses will say, well, when will I get to meet Jack? And I'll say, well, let's see what we find here. If I can come in and spend some time, get to know people, and I find some tasks that seem like they'd be fitting tasks for you and Jack, and you're interested in proceeding, then that would be a time to meet Jack. How does that sound? Because he would like to meet you too. So that's how we do it.
Thanks. We have a question from Carly. Would you put all jobs on the resume, even if they are very short term?
Yeah, I think so. And it's one of the reasons we do a visual resume. We don't get real hung up on timelines or whatever. It's just work experience. I was just mentoring somebody today who just starting on their visual resume. And I said, what is the story that you want to tell about this young woman? And let's think of all the ways to show it and have action, performance photos. Yeah, I think duration isn't as important as the experience. And it's a little different format, you see, than a formal resume too.
Beautiful. And Cherie from your town's asking about video resumes. What do you think about those?
Yeah, I think they're great. And I actually somebody I mentored fairly recently embedded some really nice video clips within her PowerPoint visual resume. She obviously needed to use a tablet or a laptop to show it, but yeah, they were great performance shots of this young man and how he got around in the world. And they were really important because of the physical impairment he had. Might be kind of hard for an employer to visualize what it looked like for him to get around in the world, you see. So yeah, I think short video clips can be really nice to embed in a visual resume.
And while we're still on resumes, Carly asks again, so no, not necessarily any need for dates when we're putting these
No, I don't
resumes
think so.
together.
It's like life experience. One of the things that I encourage people to put in is just really interesting aspects of life. Like I know some young people I didn't have when I was their age, like international travel. And so, get a picture next to the jet and, next to the Taj Mahal or something. I don't know. It's like, if you can do that, you can do all kinds of things, right? If you can travel internationally. So I think you're wanting to paint a picture, tell a story. Here's somebody, a really interesting person who has a lot to offer your business.
Beautiful. I like this comment here and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Nee. She says, thanks, Milton. It's great to hear this clear presentation. She's wondering if the discovery approach wouldn't be equally applicable to all young people, not only people with specific needs.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
Of course it is. And it's one of the things you really hear after these meetings. I described the customized plan for employment meeting. People will come up to me and say, well, I wish I had this, or, my son's year 12, he doesn't have a disability. This would be good for him. Of course it is. Yeah,
we hear it again and again across our partners that we're working with in the employment space as well.
Right.
The Broadmeadows Thrive Hub team are asking, when a match is made between a young person and an employer, can you walk through what that first meeting would look like where the young person and the employer meet?
Yeah, well, that's something else I think you really need. You need to think out and orchestrate so that it goes well. And so we're not interested in an interview, but because really we're interested in a negotiation. And so I think I would not want it to look like an interview, more like, I mean, what I'm accustomed to is thinking about, well, let's take a look at the task and meet some of the people, you know, and um, and you have to know how that's going to work for the person that you're introducing. But to me, it's more of a, let's take a walk through the company and look at the work and look at some of the things we're thinking that you know would be good for you to contribute doing. Um, but um, it's orchestrated to go well for both parties, and you think about what would the conditions be for this to go as well as possible for the job seeker and also be a really positive introduction for the you know, for the business. You might need to do it in stages. You know, honestly, you might want to meet some people outside of there before you go in. It really depends on the person, but it would not look like a traditional interview. I can say that for sure.
Yeah, that's great advice, Milton. No, we've had some examples where just the first meet is just a walk through the workplace to have a look at what the environment looks like. That's a really
Right.
gentle approach.
Right.
Amanda asks, what do you say to employers you meet who display no interest in employing anyone with a disability?
So my job isn't to persuade anybody to do anything, it's to inform them. And so if I provide the information and they're not interested, I go to the next business on the list.
It's as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's not going to be a good match for the person that we place there.
it wouldn't be. I mean, yeah. Now, you know, they might, who knows, they might change their mind. But it's, you're going to a qualified employer. A qualified employer doesn't mean that they're going to have the job. It means that there's the possibility, you know, so it's not random knocking on doors and they've probably been referred by somebody. So, you know, I don't think in customized employment, I don't think I've now, you know, you don't know what people are thinking unconsciously. You don't know what they're saying, you know, thinking and not saying. But generally, you know, people are pretty interested in the idea behind it. Now, they may not have something, or they may say, we're just not willing to negotiate jobs. They may say that. And I'll say, well, okay, I understand. I've told you a lot about Jack and the kinds of work he's interested in. Would you have an idea about another company I might contact? And they might have another lead for you, you know?
Beautiful. Troy asks, what are your thoughts about disclosing the nature of disability to the employer?
Well, you would never do that without the person's permission. But one of the things we ask for permission to do is not to use the name of the disability, but to be able to describe its function, the business. Like, this is why I'm representing Jack, you know? These are the kinds of things he needs to have in place. So, you know, if it's somebody, this wouldn't be true for Jack, but you know, somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience reading, you just say that. So, you know, for these tasks that require reading, we need to think of another way to do this. And so we talk about the function of the disability, not the name of it, because that takes people down some kind of rabbit trail, you know?
Yeah, we often talk too about just providing the solutions to the employers. Often worry about risk and time
Right.
and what it's going to cost to them. So if we, rather than going in with the name of a disability, we talk about those conditions for success and here is how, you know, this is how this young person works well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's it.
With regards to moving on, what if you live in a small town with limited businesses and limited employment opportunities?
That's hard. It is. I mean, so when I started work with community employment, it was in Crestwood, Kentucky. That's not a big place. But one of the things to do in small communities, and I learned this in Crestwood and Buckner, these little towns, is that there are hidden businesses. I mean, really, there are businesses that, you know, you think you drive down the road and you see everything, but you don't. And so it's one of the reasons that networking is so important. Sometimes people have really cool businesses, they operate out of their homes, you know, or, you know, I ended up, one of my very first jobs, I got to work with somebody in Discovery. He ended up working for a manufacturing business that was just way down a gravel road. I didn't even know it was there, you know? And so I think you just really have to be resourceful in finding out what is it that people do there to make a living, and it all may not be on the surface. And networking, knowing other people, like having a team, it's one of the things that I really like about customized employment. I've never felt like I'm hanging out there by myself. I'm a partner. You know, we have a team. We're in this together, and we're all generating ideas to explore.
Yeah, it takes a community. Thank you
Yeah.
so very much, Milt. I'm seeing lots of comments about how informative people have found today's meeting. Really appreciate your time. Looking forward to seeing you again in October, where we're going to talk about, once we've found the placement, what we can do to make sure that it's really a successful ongoing position for our young people with disability. Don't forget to register for that session. It's a different link for anybody that hasn't registered. Sarah has just popped the link in the chat there. Also, feel free to subscribe to the NCED newsletter to keep up to date with what's happening in the sector and for future opportunities like this. I want to thank Beck and Leanne, our Auslan interpreters today. Thank you so much for being here to support us. Just checking my list to make sure. Also, the recording will be available. We will send that out along with all of the documents that Milt has mentioned today. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you all in a month's time.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.